Let's start this lecture with a definition of play. So there is not an exact agreed upon definition of play. There are many definitions, but they're all somewhat similar to each other. So we're just going to go with one that I really like, which is from Maria Montessori. So you can look at the article that I've included here that gives you more information about these elements of play that are included on the right side of the slide, but just a little bit of information about them. So important pieces of play is that it's self-chosen, that when you're playing, you choose to do it. Someone's not telling you what you are supposed to be doing, that you're directing your activity and the play things that you're engaged in. Also, that it doesn't really matter what the end result is. When we talk about the means are more valuable than the ends, we mean that the process is more important than the product. So the idea of just doing what you want and just having fun, exploring, trying things out, doesn't really matter what the end result is. That's play. Play is also guided by what is called mental rules. So a lot of times we think play is completely free-flowing, that there's no rule structure to it whatsoever. But typically when we're playing, we have some sense of what it is we want to be doing and what we want the play to look like. So the idea here is that there are rules, but they are defined by the players themselves, not by some external outside body who's dictating what those rules are meant to be. So take dramatic play, for example. If everyone decides that so-and-so is going to be the mom and so-and-so is going to be the dad and so-and-so is going to be the baby, the rule is you need to stay in character to make the play work and be able to function. So that's a rule that is created and defined and sustained by the players, not by some outside entity. Play should be imaginative. Sometimes that's referred to as non-literality, taking you away from the humdrum, the drudgery of day-to-day life and letting your imagination run wild and be able to experience things you might not be able to experience in your ordinary day-to-day life. And then also, it should be something that's done with a happy, active, alert state of mind, not something where you're stressed out or feeling forced or feeling unhappy. There should be pleasant feelings associated with play. Play is a really important part of the human experience and particularly important for young children to engage in. So please take a look at the graphic on the right side of the screen, which gives you some of the benefits of engaging in play, and then also take a look at the NPR article on the left side of the screen, which gives you more information about the benefits of play. Children engage in several different types of play: physical play, object play, social play. In this particular class, we're not going to talk about physical play and object play. For today's lecture, we're going to focus on social play, and so you'll see more in-depth discussion of social play on the next few slides. But I would encourage you, if you are interested in children's play, to consider taking Theories of Play, HD 304. It's offered this fall, and it goes into all kinds of detail. You'll probably learn more than you ever wanted to know about all kinds of things related to play, including more about children's physical and object play. As I noted on the previous slide, in this class we're going to focus on social play. So social play is play where children who are of roughly the same age or similar ages interact with each other. The play is structured, but remember that doesn't mean that it's necessarily structured by an adult or some outside agent. The play is structured by the children, so the rules and the structure is created from the players, not from outside of the play. Oftentimes it includes pretend or imaginative play. That's very popular with young children. So an example is children playing house or a group of children playing a game of tag. These would be examples of social play. So on the next slide, we're also going to talk about levels of social play, because as children get more skilled socially, as they get older, they tend to engage in more complex social play than when they are younger and not quite so skilled. As I said on the previous slide, there are different levels of social play that we expect to see from children. So these are levels, so we expect children to start at the lower level and then work their way up to the higher levels. I gave you some rough age estimates here of when you would expect to see these different stages of social play, But remember, these are just estimates, so children may be doing these things before or after the age ranges that I've given to you. So generally, at the beginning, children start with not really playing with other people at all, not really engaging in play at all. So if you think about an infant or a baby, they aren't necessarily doing a lot of play-based activities. So they're mostly being held, they're eating, they're sleeping, they're being changed, but not really meeting that definition of play that we gave on the first slide of this lecture. So once children actually move into official play, then we should see them start out with solitary play, where they are playing by themselves, playing with toys that are different from other children, not really paying a whole lot of attention to what children around them are doing, just kind of doing their own thing. This is very common with older infants and with toddlers, where they're just kind of in their own zone when it comes to play. Then we have onlooker play, where children sometimes watch other children play, but maybe don't join in the play themselves. So maybe they haven't been exposed to blocks before, and then they watch for a while to see what other children do with the blocks before they enter into that play on their own. Around the same time that this onlooker play is taking place, we also see something called parallel play. This is where children are playing side by side with each other. So they're playing with similar or the same objects, they're doing the same kinds of activities, they're playing in close proximity to each other, but they're not really interacting in any meaningful kind of way. They're not sharing materials, they're not reciprocating activities, they're not talking with one another, they're just kind of hanging out in close proximity. Then next we have associative play. This is where children are starting to do kind of low-level interactions with each other. So they may hand each other toys, they may have brief moments of working together to accomplish a task, but just kind of new working together, but not really planfully saying, hey, let's do this together, let's work on this, let's build this together, let's see if we can make a castle. So not necessarily planful and with a common goal, but just occasionally working together out of convenience. And then finally, we have cooperative play. And this is where you truly see that teamwork, that cooperation come into being. Children set out to play together. They have a plan for what they want to do. They can sustain their play over time. They're working towards some commonly accepted goal. Oftentimes there's a leader, and then there are other children who are engaging in activities that the leader has suggested or set out. So on the next slide, you'll see pictorial examples of some of these types of social play that should further help you to understand what each one of them means. Knowing what developmental progression in various areas of development should look like not only helps us to know when children are doing what they should be doing developmentally according to their age, but it also helps us to know when there might be issues, when there are things that we might need to intervene with. So a lot of times people worry if preschoolers or early elementary school age children are playing by themselves or playing next to other children, so engaged in solitary or parallel play or non-social play, but there really isn't need for concern. So yes, absolutely non-social play is more likely to be seen in young children, particularly toddlers. They're not quite ready for the more social play, cooperative and associative, but it doesn't mean that older children don't engage in non-social play also. So the thing that we really need to be looking for here is not whether they are playing by themselves, but what they're doing when they're playing by themselves. So a toddler is going to be filling up a bucket and dumping it out, squishing Play-Doh without, really doing anything in particular with it, splashing in the water. So testing out materials, trying out their properties. An older child should be doing things more constructively, so using materials in the way that they were intended, reading a book, putting together a puzzle, snapping Legos together to build something. They are also going to be creating things. So they're going to be building something with blocks and drawing a particular picture. So it's totally fine that they're on their own, but they're doing something in a more constructive way. They also might be over in the dramatic play area, perfectly happy in the little make-believe house, cooking a full meal for their baby doll without any other child around, which is totally cool because they're involved in something constructive and meaningful, not just kind of wandering around, not just banging or waving materials. So on their own, but doing something more constructive with the materials around them. A similar topic to children's social play is these milestones related to who children play with. So this would be related more to creation of friendships rather than just generally engaging in social play with children in the classroom or children who are close by. So when children get to be about 3, in that larger social group, there will be a few children that they will call their friends, that they enjoy playing with more, that when they are playing with this subset of children that they tend to engage in more complex social play levels than with other children in the classroom. And then as they get to 4 and 5, that exclusivity and tightening up of those friendship circles progresses even more, so that 4-year-olds are really choosing a couple special friends that they really like to play with. And then once they get to age 5, those friendships become more reciprocal, more back and forth, not just a good play partner, but someone that you share interests with and maybe like to have limited conversation with. They're more exclusive and more enduring. So it's important to understand that challenging behavior, challenging play behavior, all children exhibit challenging behavior. Sometimes they do because they're at a particular age or stage. So unfortunately, sometimes toddlers and 2-year-olds bite because they don't have language skills in their command yet. Preschoolers can be very reluctant to do things that you ask them to do. Early elementary school age children lie, as do teenagers. So these are all pretty normal developmental patterns of behavior. Also, sometimes kids just have a bad day. Sometimes they engage in challenging behavior because they're overtired, their family moved over the weekend. There's a variety of reasons that children exhibit challenging behaviors. The difference between a challenging behavior that sometimes happens or happens for a particular developmental time period is different than challenging behavior that happens over time and is repeated. So the challenging behavior that we're going to be talking about on the next few slides really does meet the definition on this particular slide. It is a repeated pattern of behavior. It happens over and over and over again. It's not a developmental phase. It's not a one-day thing. This is something that continues to happen over time. It's also something that significantly interferes with children's ability to do the things that they're supposed to be doing. And young children are supposed to be playing and interacting with materials, learning to get along with their peers, learning how to get along with adults who are not part of their family. So these are the kinds of behaviors that interfere really with the work of the young child, that play and that building of relationships. So these are the kind of behaviors that we need to kind of get to the root cause, and we need to figure out and help children to minimize them so that they can reap all of the developmental benefits that they should be getting at this age. It's important to pay attention to these challenging behaviors, not just because they interrupt healthy development for individual children and can make it difficult to manage classrooms effectively, but also because it is mildly prevalent. It's not completely uncommon. So you can see that the prevalence rates for young children to exhibit challenging behaviors is 10 to 30%. So if you have a classroom of 20 children, you can expect that 2 to 6 of them will exhibit challenging behavior, which is a lot. It's something that you're going to have to pay attention to. It's not something that would be unusual to be happening in your early childhood setting. So this can include chronic, mild to moderate levels of these challenging behaviors. So for some of these 10 to 30% of children, it will be more mild levels of these challenging behaviors, and some it will be more escalated. But it's also important to pay attention to, not just because it happens a fair amount, but also because 50% of infants and toddlers who exhibit challenging behavior, either mild to moderate or above, are going to show these same behaviors 4 years later and into the school years. So if we don't address these challenging behavior issues early on, then we could possibly have children who are not outgrowing this, that this is continuing to impact their personal development and their ability to navigate social situations. So on the previous slide and on this slide, I gave you links to the last slide, it was the NEAR website. This slide, it's a PDF by NEAR that I think you'll find helpful, and this is a national organization that looks at early childhood education research. And the PDF that I've provided for you on this slide gives you additional information about challenging behavior and its prevalence and what we can do to correct it. On this slide and the next, I've given you some examples of what challenging behavior could be. So it could be one or more of these things. If you're seeing these kinds of things, again, try to think about, is this age typical? Is this something that we sort of expect to see from children at this particular age? Also, how often is it happening? Is it happening every day, or it's just every now and then? Is it going on over a long period of time? Is it significantly interfering with the child's ability to engage in social interaction and other constructive types of play behaviors? So if it's kind of age typical, it's not happening very often, it's not happening over a long repeated period of time, if it's not interfering with their ability to navigate the classroom socially and in terms of other types of play, it's probably not challenging behavior. If it is these things and it is not age typical, it is interfering with their day-to-day lives, it is something that's happening over time and very persistently and frequently, then it more than likely is something that you need to pay attention to and address earlier rather than later. An example of challenging behavior actually comes from a class that I did not work in. It was another classroom in a center that I worked in, and there was a kindergarten age child, a 5-year-old, who was extremely disruptive. So he got angry multiple times a day. When he got angry, he would use swear words, which is fairly atypical for a 5-year-old. He also was very aggressive to staff. He threw furniture. So, just to give you an example of how aggressive, one of the teachers in that room was an ex-military guy who decided to come back and study early childhood, way over 6 foot, big guy. And this little boy broke his finger, broke the finger of the teacher in trying to restrain him and keep him from being aggressive in the classroom. He was sometimes taken to a room to try and calm down. It was a research room, so there really wasn't anything in there. It was a room that hadn't been used in a while. There was a phone attached to the wall, and he ripped the phone out of the wall and threw it across at one of the windows. Luckily, it was safety glass, so it didn't break. But what I really want to emphasize to you is that these are behaviors that are atypical. They are very persistent. So, in the earlier slide, we were talking about that they happen over a long period of time. They're definitely sort of out of character for young children. So all children get upset and throw things occasionally, but these are behaviors that are both more persistent, last longer than is typical, and are really more extreme than we generally see in young children. There are many reasons why children might exhibit challenging behavior. I'll talk a little bit about the points on this slide, but I also want to make sure that you watch the YouTube video that I've provided. It gives a lot more detail about reasons behind children's challenging behavior, but sometimes children exhibit challenging behavior because they have special needs that maybe aren't being served as well as they could be through intervention. So it's important, if you believe that a child does have a special need, that you make sure to get that child referred for services, because then those services will link you up with appropriate interventions and strategies that can help that child in managing the behaviors that they're exhibiting. There's also temperamental issues. So when children are more temperamentally difficult, when they're more fearful, that can create challenging behaviors. So it's important to pay attention to the child's individual characteristics, the individual genetic, biological way of interacting with the world that they have, and so try to match environments as best as you can to that child's temperamental style. Parenting style can be part of this equation. So when parents are more authoritarian, more laissez-faire, or permissive, then sometimes we also see challenging behaviors. So helping parents to think about appropriate limit setting, how to factor in sort of warmth and empathy into their parenting can help. Sometimes when kids are just frustrated and stressed, so you see on our last point that I mentioned trauma, ACEs, and toxic stress. So this kind of encapsulates a lot of issues. So when children are experiencing stress that's just beyond what is manageable, they're not provided with support for managing the stress that they're experiencing. When children have been abused or neglected, when they're living in chaotic environments that are not conducive to healthy growth and development. So a lot of children in our world have experienced these kinds of traumas and these toxic stressors. And I think I have mentioned previously, when we were talking about physical development, these ACEs, right? So these adverse childhood experiences that create trauma, that induce toxic stress. So when children are living those kinds of lives, it's very difficult not to respond with behavior that says, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, I'm having a hard time, and I'm trying to show you through these behaviors that may seem challenging to you as an adult, but I'm telling you, my life is really awful and I need some assistance and support. As I noted before, it's important to pay attention to challenging behavior because it's prevalent, and when children exhibit challenging behavior, it can persist and follow them for a long time to come. But it's also important to pay attention to challenging behavior because negative developmental outcomes can occur if we don't. And then also, I want you to take a look at the PDF on this slide. It both talks about these negative outcomes of not addressing challenging behavior, but it also talks about the positive outcomes that come when we do address challenging behavior. So it gives both. But just to talk a little bit about these negative developmental outcomes that can be related to the exhibition of challenging behavior. When children are little and they're exhibiting challenging behavior, later we might see higher teen delinquency rates, higher rates of gang membership, higher rates of adult incarceration. So you can see in the parentheses that early behavior problems are the single best predictor of these things. So really important to pay attention to. Preschool expulsion, 3.2 times more preschoolers are expelled from school than K through 12 students. That's a lot. So clearly we have a lot of little people who are exhibiting challenging behavior, and kicking them out of preschool and sending them back into the situations that may be directly resulting in this stress and challenging behavior is not a good idea. We need to figure out better ways to manage this so we can help kids and keep them in preschool, not just kick them out. Kids who exhibit challenging behavior are rejected by their peers early on and persistently over time. They often have punitive contacts with their teachers and their educators. They have unpleasant family interaction patterns. They're more likely to experience school failure. And then you can see kind of a long laundry list of things that we also know are associated with these ACEs. So here's the bummer. Kids have adverse childhood experiences. They exhibit challenging behavior because of the stress and trauma that they've experienced. We don't respond well to it because it's challenging and we don't know what it means and we don't know what to do with it. And then kids have all of these really awful developmental outcomes. So it's just this horrible cyclical issue that we need to kind of work on. But Just like with ACEs, when kids exhibit challenging behavior, which is a symptom of ACEs, they are more likely to have fatal accidents, to use substances, to divorce, have unemployment, have psychiatric illness, and eventually early death. So again, these underlying conditions are not what ultimately, their underlying conditions are what are causing them to behave in this challenging way. It's not the challenging behavior that's causing the trauma, it's the other way around. One of the classrooms that I worked in included a child with autism, fairly severe on the continuum of autistic behaviors, and he did not have communication. It was very difficult for him to socialize with other children, and he really liked this one area of the classroom. It was over in the book corner, and that's kind of where he hung out all the time. This was a shared classroom, so there was a morning group and an afternoon group. I worked with the afternoon group. There was another teacher with the morning group, and the night before, the morning teacher had put some beautiful things up on the ceiling, kind of streamers hanging down, some cool decorations. We didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to them. We just thought it was a nice addition. But when this particular little boy came to class the next afternoon and went to sit in his book corner, he obviously found it very disturbing because he sat down for about 2 seconds, got up, started running from corner to corner in the room, banging his hands against his head, screaming. So luckily we quickly realized that it was probably this stuff hanging from the ceiling that was kind of sensory overload and was a difference in the environment that this child wasn't comfortable with. So we grabbed some chairs, got all the stuff down off the ceiling real quick, and our friend immediately sat down, took his hands away from his ears, stopped screaming, and communicated that he was interested in reading a book. So environmental things may not seem like a big deal to you and I, but they really can be a big deal to kids. So we always need to look very carefully at the environment that we've created and that we're providing for children and make sure that it isn't something that we can fix. We also always need to look at our own behaviors. Is there something we could be doing differently? Because it's not always the child. Sometimes it's the environment and the interactions that they're having with folks around them. So we need to pay attention to all elements of a classroom when we are devising strategies to help children with their challenging behaviors. There are various strategies that can be used to help children minimize challenging behaviors, reduce the trauma and stressors that they're experiencing, help them to engage in higher quality social interactions. So I gave an example on the previous slide of really checking environments, checking our own interactions. I would also really encourage you to take a look at the trauma-informed care book that I mentioned. When I teach the guidance and interactions class here on campus, I also talk about trauma-informed care. I utilize this book, so in the future, if you're taking this class with me, then that's some information that you will be getting. If not, I would really encourage you to check out the book. It's a good read. I think it will really help you to understand what trauma-informed care is about and how it can be useful to all children, not just children who've experienced trauma. Another strategy that you can use comes from the Center on the Social and Emotional Foundations for Early Learning, or CECEFL. So I've given you their website that you can go take a look at. Also, your homework, one of your sub-homework assignments for this week will be taking a look at this pyramid and some of the work that CECEFL is doing. But basically what this pyramid is suggesting is that our first strategy is to make sure that we have people who are working with young children who know what they're doing, that they know about research, they know about evidence, they know about best practices, that they're ready to work with children. So understanding why children exhibit challenging behaviors and what those look like, how challenging behaviors are different than just age-typical behaviors. What are some strategies that we can use? So when we have folks who are ready to go into their workplaces with good knowledge and skills, then all of this is just going to come easier. So once we have that effective workforce in place, there are some strategies that we can use. And one is the blue level, so this kind of bottom level of the pyramid. So first of all, Every child deserves a high quality, supportive, safe environment where they feel comfortable, where they can play, where there's good stuff going on, that includes nurturing and responsive relationships. This is the crux of trauma-informed care, providing safe, supportive environments and providing high quality, responsive relationships. If we give that to every child, we're going to minimize a whole bunch of challenging behaviors, because that's the rock bottom of what all children need. So this should be given to children who exhibit challenging behaviors as well as children who do not exhibit challenging behaviors. So sometimes, even if we provide these fabulous, high quality, responsive environments, we may still have children who are exhibiting some challenging behaviors. So if those are sometimes, if we can implement strategies in the classroom that can minimize these things, that would be the green level. So let's say that you have a child who's come to you who has been traumatized by residing in a neighborhood where there's lots of gunfire. And so then every time there's loud noises, this child really, really struggles, even though you've provided this good, high quality environment. So some special strategies are going to be needed just for this child, right? Not every child in the room is going to be concerned about loud noises. So putting some structures and supports in place. So maybe if you know there's going to be a loud noise, you provide that child with noise canceling headphones, or you warn them ahead of time when you think a loud noise might be happening. Or if the classroom gets too noisy, you allowed them to go to a different area of the room that's quieter so that they can navigate that, or anything, any kind of special strategy that you give to that child. Now, there are some children, unfortunately, like the child that I mentioned on the slide where I was giving examples of challenging behaviors. This child needed much more intensive intervention. The good classroom environment that was provided wasn't quite enough. Some easy to implement targeted strategies within the classroom environment weren't enough. He needed some extra special intervention. He needed to have a person who was assigned to him. He needed to have some time away from the classroom. He needed to have some additional intervention. So we know that this is true sometimes when children are having occupation or physical therapy or speech and language therapy. We know sometimes we have to provide those supports in the classroom, and then we also have to provide additional therapeutic time to work on those physical or speech or motor issues that that child is having. So this would be similar, but just in the social and emotional realm rather than the physical or speech and language realm. And then finally, just to wrap up with some reminders. So some of these are reminders related to more challenging behaviors, and some of them are reminders just for promoting age-typical play and social interaction, because not only do we need to focus on kids who are having a hard time with play behaviors, but also we have other children who just need some mild support to be able to be at their best socially and in terms of their play. So remember to provide activities that are play-based, child-initiated, give plenty of opportunities to interact with others and engage in social play. So the types of activities and environment that you set up is going to matter. It's going to influence positively these play and social interaction types of things. Act as a facilitator. Try not to get too directive with things. So just be there kind of as a guide on the side. Rather than a sage on the stage, to help children play well, both with objects and peers. Give them suggestions, ask them questions, make good comments, be a supportive presence, but not completely take over unless that child does need those more intensive interventions, and then you may have to be more directive than you would otherwise. Make sure that all children feel like they can be included in play. So plan activities that, again, are play-based and child-initiated, but are also inclusive. Encourage everyone to play. And when children are exclusionary, directly address it. There's a great book that was mentioned in the Reject video that I had you watch. So when they were talking about Vivian Goosen Paley's work, You Can't Say You Can't Play, this is what I'm talking about. So not letting children be mean to other children, making sure that children understand that when we come to this classroom, everybody gets to play with everybody. So everybody gets to play. Nobody gets to be excluded. That's not okay in this space. And it's surprisingly very powerful with young children. And then also, again, if you do have challenging behaviors, use those tools available to you. So use trauma-informed care practices. Use the SECEFL pyramid and the other resources that SECEFL provides. And then also there's this really cool agency in California. It's called the California Inclusion and Behavioral Consultation, and you can check out their website. So if you are having a child who's struggling, you can invite a consultant to come to your classroom, and that consultant will work with you on how you can do better to serve that child. So what behaviors are you exhibiting that you can change? What classroom setup do you have? Is there any way that that can be changed to be more supportive to that child? So they're not coming to assess the child themselves or to fix that child. They're kind of coming to help fix you in your classroom to see what you can be doing better and more in a more supportive way to help that child out.